Hello. Testing, testing. Hello. Testing, testing. Beautiful. All right. Good. Then off we go. Today, kids, we are going to finalize the tree, finally, after what seems like an eon. Basically, what we started with, for those who haven't been in, we started with this actual gnome house on the right. I didn't build this live. I built this off camera, and but it is the style that I'm going for. The goal here is to build a collection of suitable terrain pieces that will fit nicely onto a grid, onto a battle map grid with 1-inch grids, assuming. I find that battle maps are very, very convenient. They can be extremely well drawn, but being flat with 3D miniatures does not work for me. It just kind of breaks the illusion of it. And having a few pieces in there, it doesn't need to be a full Dwarven Forge, terrain where the entire thing is 3D. It just needs to be a couple of pieces that give the illusion that you're in this immersive area. I'm wanting to build a collection that is going to be themed in Enchanted Forest. These pieces, I don't know how many I'll make, probably 8, 9, 10 of them that will be in there, will be in a bundle by itself for upcoming Kickstarter later this year, probably in the fourth quarter. There'll be a series of collections that will all be available for purchase. Off the top of my head, I'm aiming for the Enchanted Forest being done first. Then I'll move on to a desert theme, and then I will progress from there. I've got a couple more themes that I want to stick with. But it's important in each theme to keep the artistic style similar so that all the pieces seem to go together. Like I said on Monday, just think about the last time you might have been to a convention or you saw online some pictures of huge battle tables that are fully decked out in terrain. And you remember the ones that looked best were the ones that had everything that looked like it was all together. All the pieces looked the same. They were all scaled well. They were all painted within the same style. And nothing stood out. If you would come into a table where one of the pieces was done, say, by an amateur and the rest was done by a professional, you would immediately see the amateur piece jut out. So that's why it's important to try to keep the same artistic style. If you're doing this on your own, it's a lot easier to do that because, quite frankly, you have your own art style and you'll just naturally stick with it. But if you're working with other people, multiple artists, it's important to establish kind of a guideline to begin with before you even begin so that everybody can follow it. Almost every big name company that deals with any type of art industry, including Disney, they will have a guideline booklet that is sent out to all the artists before any project begins. It will have all the colors picked, and that will be the colors in that particular scene that is going to be allowed. They should turn that off, I guess. They have a list of different color palettes. They have guidelines on, for instance, height and width of certain bodies and things like that. So, having said that, we're going to finish up this tree today. We're going to get with the bark, just like we did on the gnome house. And then we're going to scale it down, get it to fit, and it should be good to go. So, let's see here. What we're going to do, when we last left off, we had Turbosmooth placed on the tree and the trunk after we had fused the two together as one piece. What we hadn't done yet is add the special bark. Now the bark, I did this on the gnome tree off-site, but I'll show you now what you have to do. Essentially, it's important to put the Turbosmooth on first, crank up your iteration here so that you have as many polys as you can, but don't get it so much that it's all white. If you see nothing but white on your screen because all the wireframes are just so many, you're putting too many or faces on your model, and you don't need it that detailed. After a certain point, you won't even know the difference. Add an edit poly modifier on top of the Turbosmooth. By the way, real quickly, someone asked last week where I get these buttons here. These 6 buttons are not default visible when you get Max. You have to go to the modifier list, which will be basically, this will be directly above this hierarchy section when you first install it. To get these buttons, you right-click the modifier list, and it'll pop up a little menu that's hidden. Configure modifier sets is the first choice. You go to here, and this is where it will show how many buttons. You can tell them how many buttons you want. You can type in as many as you want. You can have a buttload of buttons that go all the way down here. And then you will find all of the tools on the left. You just scroll down, and you just drag onto the button that you want, and it'll automatically assign to it. Keep in mind that if you go in and add, 25 buttons to this and think you're really neat because you're saving yourself a lot of time, all of these buttons will start pushing everything else down. So this thing would be down further than it was, and you'll start losing a little more real estate, which is pretty precious as it is in Max, unless you have like dual monitors and things like that. So if they're not showing right there, if the buttons are not showing, just go to right-click the same thing, go to Show Buttons. Make sure that's checked. All right, so first thing we're going to do is select the polygon as our sub-object feature. And that brings up our usual familiar tools that we've been using. The extrude button we've been using quite a bit. That brings out polygons. We use the bridge tool to gap the bridge between or bridge the gap rather between the top part of the tree and the bottom. It fuses edges together. But right now we're going to worry about this special thing over here called paint deformation. It's always minimized by default because, quite frankly, not many people use it. This feature down here is very similar to a program called ZBrush. ZBrush is a standalone program that is a high dynamic sculpting tool. I believe you can model a little bit in it. It's not really used for modeling. It's really, well, in modeling in the sense that we're doing today with polygons. Usually, ZBrush is a tool where you would start out with a sphere or some kind of cube, and you would push and pull like you're sculpting clay. And it would come right out, and you can smooth, bump out, and you can carve in just like you can with clay. This does very similar, but it's much, much more primitive and limiting to what you can do. But the first thing you need to do is click the push-pull button. That initiates this whole feature. And you can move your cursor onto your model, and you can see that the cursor has changed to this kind of a circle with a crosshair in the middle of it. And if I circle around to the side, and the computer does not want to run quite well since I've got so many faces, you can see that there is a little line that sticks outward, perpendicular from the circle and the cross section. And that's basically to tell you which direction you're facing, the cursor is facing, because it is essentially doing it in 3D. And it's basically opposite of wherever that arrow is, which is kind of silly if you ask me, but if it went the other way, you wouldn't see it because you'd be pointing into the model. So I guess it does make a little more sense. And basically it conforms as you move the cursor around. It'll just follow along the surface. It's really quite powerful. Now, on the rest of these three, these sections up here, I have never used and just kind of ignore. I haven't really gotten into the brush options. There are a plethora of different things you can do to change the strength to really finite. What you can do with the push-pull tool. But I think it's really unnecessary because it's really done in these three sections right here. The pull value, the push-pull value, literally is a positive number means it's going to pull outward. A negative number means it's going to push inward. And you basically are putting down. It goes hand in hand with the brush strength, which is down here. That will determine just how far out it pulls from the actual model. And of course, the brush size is just that. It's the size of the brush. If you want to do it smaller, which is what we're going to be doing, we're going to drop it down to like around 2 and see what that is. Oh, you have to actually click somewhere else so that it hits it in. There we go. That's awfully small. So we're going to try like, let's see, 10. Oops. Again, you just type it in, doesn't do anything. You can either hit enter as well, but it's a little bit bigger, but not too big. It's too big. So 5 should be it. Yeah, that's what I want. Perfect size. Now, as far as the strength wise, this is purely experimental. It's something that you're going to have to test out on a trial and error basis. Because really, to me, the value to me does not relate to how far it comes out. It's supposed to be, in my opinion, if you say 10 millimeters like this, it should theoretically jet out 10 millimeters. And it does to a certain extent, but there's times where I've noticed it doesn't quite come out 10 millimeters. If I just click the mouse button once, and that's it, it juts out like that. Now that, if I measured that, it would be 10 millimeters, according to that. Which means this whole thing is like colossal. I disagree in that case because if I unhide, see if I still got my dwarf. Yeah. If I take this and I build just a simple cylinder, that cylinder right there is set at 25 millimeters. You can't tell me that it's the same size. There's no way that that's 25. Well, I really think that it's a little bit off. I don't think it's quite as accurate. I mean, that's 10 millimeters, so that goes up to about not quite half. 12 millimeters is half right here. If I were to move it over completely and raise it up and turn it into wireframe, it does look like 10 millimeters. In this case, it looks like it actually stayed accurate. I do not trust the measurement on that. This case, it just happened to be lucky, but I've had many, many times where the deformation part did not come out quite like it should, and it was a bit off. It's mainly because that part of the program was made as an afterthought. It was not made with the intention of taking over, because at the time ZBrush was still quite popular, and still is. So there's no way that they would come in there and take over with this simple feature here. But nevertheless, we're gonna crank that down from 10 to like maybe 2. And we're going to leave the brush strength as is, and we're going to just experiment. We got to turn it on. And let's go back to F4. Oh, F3, then F4. And we're going to try out and see what happens. Now, if we click it one time, it's just going to shoot it straight out. If we click, hold, and drag, it will not only bump out, but then it will, as you move along with the cursor, it will bump out and make an entire line bump out, not just a point. So you got to have a mindset of how far you want to go on this. And for this, we're just going to go down and see what happens. something like that. That's it. That's all you need for bark and things like that. Bark, if you're not doing something like crazy birch or something like that, if you're doing something like oak, which generally you can get away with and all that, it's just a series. If you go to an oak tree, it's just a series of just uh, sections of almost rectangular shapes that are conformed to the curvature of the tree itself. Just don't make them that they're uniformed. They're never. It's not really all that uniformed. It's offset. So the more chaotic you can make these, the better it's going to look. So go down here. Don't make it quite so long that time. Something like that. Go up. Perfect. Push that, just one there. And that's how we're going to do this. We can turn off the wireframe. It is dragging a little bit because I've got it a little bit higher than I should. And if you want to, you can lower it down just a tad bit and try to increase it later by adding another Turbosmooth. Sometimes that really helps and sometimes not. Right now, I can tell you that my computer is really starting to see the ends of my memory. Well, actually, in this regard, it's my graphic card. So that's usually what's actually powering the viewport. So you may be having a little bit of issues with that if you don't have a pretty good graphics card. But again, welcome to the world of 3D modeling. It's not cheap. So we're going to keep on going around like this. And it doesn't really matter how you do it. You can even go over the same lines and make them a little higher than the other ones. You can't go wrong with this. You just don't want to be too uniformed. You don't want to allow yourself to get into too much of a pattern. Although you want to keep them fairly vertical, don't keep them perfectly straight up and down. Wrap them around if you have to. I mean, they're not all just perfectly straight up and down. And as a whole, you're going to be looking at this as a whole. You won't be looking at it as individual bark. You'll just be taking it in as a general look. So it really doesn't matter. There's one thing I wanted to keep track of, is having this pushed down too far. Again, that we want to keep that bottom as flat as we can. So I'm going to Control Z that out of there. And later I will get a smaller brush. Right now I want to keep it all consistent, even though I can change the brush size up and down a little bit. I just find it simpler to keep it the same size. And then we'll shrink it down in a bit and get the bottom edges. I don't want to put the bark on the bare part of the roots, even though the roots themselves obviously will have the bark on them. There's some pieces of bark roots that are kind of stripped away, and I tend to like that kind of color. When I paint it, I'll paint all this darker, oak or gray would look good. But the root itself will be kind of a tan, light brown, something like that. Now, given the fact that seems to be taking quite a while, I am going to quickly save this so I don't lose my work. Save it as a new file. But I'm going to actually delete that edit poly because I want to drop the face count down to 3 because I'm noticing it just taking a little bit too long for my patience to get through that. You can then apply the edit mesh, or edit poly rather, turn on everything. The strength was, I want to say, oh, it was 2, and then size was 5. Yeah. And then we'll go back and test this out. Yeah, it moves a lot better than it did. And see how quickly it goes this time. Oh yeah, it goes much better this time. It's still lagging a bit, but it's going much quicker than it was a second ago. And we'll apply another Turbosmooth later on. Again, we want to keep away from the base for now. You even put some dots around here and something like that, and then just kind of fill in between. Like so. And if it merges with some others, who cares? If you see these kind of triangulations, don't sweat it, because it's either going to be smoothed out at the end, or it'll be in the printer, and it will print out a little bit different than this. You can make them long or short, however you want them. And from a distance, you can either imagine them to be tons of little insects crawling all over your tree, or it could be bark, depending on your imagination and how you want to buy it. But putting next to the dwarf tree, it'll match. It'll have a lot more similarity to the two. So. Hope everybody's doing well tonight. It's good to see such a turnout. Always nice to see people coming in here. Found that I'd be doing this stuff anyway in the evenings, getting the stuff ready for the Kickstarter, and just kind of doing this almost therapeutically. Hey, how you doing, buddy? Thank you, Captain Awesome, for making it tonight. Always good to have you in here. This whole thing started out actually by an individual in this room right now. This whole thing passed as a simple project idea that was just supposed to be a hobby. And now it's gotten to be where I've done a Kickstarter and started a company and make models and have to do taxes and all that wonderful stuff. And got a printer, which finally got in the mail the other day. Haven't been able to take it out yet. Going to do a video unboxing of that. I think that would be something that people would be interested in. Although mine is fully assembled, I decided on something that unique. I'm not an electrician or an engineer, electrical engineer by any means. So having not put that together, I think, is a good idea. Autosave. So I'm going to have an unboxing of it I'm pretty sure that guy is going to get rich. He's an idea man, so he gets money for ideas. I'll pay him in video games or something. But yeah, we should be getting that box. It may be Saturday. I think that might be a good day to bring it out. I need, even though it's assembled, I need a few hours to download the firmware, get the thing charged up, fired up. I mean, I'll still record all of that while I'm taking out the box and whatnot, but it'll take me a while to get all that together. Now, the more I'm working on, I am too. It's going to be pretty sweet. It's just a clever little machine, and the owner is just a genius. I mean, he's really had become almost the Elon Musk of printer companies. He worked for a company that was geared towards open source 3D printing software anyway. And when he left there and opened his own company, Pressa, or I guess it could be Prussia, but I'm pretty sure he's pronounced as a Pressa. He developed open source printer. I kid you not, the printer that he sells, the software is all open source. He just uses it and puts a sticker on it and hands you some gummy beans or gummy bears and you're good. All right. So for now, we just kind of clean it up a little bit. Helps to join some of the bark together so that it looks like it's more, even though it's individual pieces, some of them might grow together and make it look like they're one. Stuff like this. Yeah, I'm liking this. It's turning out good. The brush size is right. Oops. Don't want that bottom one. All right. Now, for the bottom, if we shrink the brush down, it'll just make the bark smaller, and we don't want to make the bark necessarily small. I probably do want to remove that base and add a solitary, because right now I think, yeah, right now it's a lot. So let's turn push pull off for now, and let's try and see if we can't select, because it's not all flat, I can tell you right now. Let's see here. I really just want that bottom section, but I don't want to obviously go in and select everything. Let's try that again. Because I like this piece over here, it's just the rest of it is not coming down where I want it to go. All of this is not even down here. So we can try and grab it that way. You know, it may be better just to do vertices. Switch it to vertices. See how many vertex and vertices we got? A lot of them. And it's not even, which is not good. giving some thought to deleting these. Let's try flattening it first. Last time we tried flattening it, it didn't quite work great, but it did kind of work. To do that, you press the Z button over here where it says make planar, and it's going to make plain all those pieces, and see if it does it. It did. However, there's an issue. You've got all kinds of overlapping faces. You can see this vertice going this way, one going, these edges going this way, another going this way, and those aren't, when they're white, that means they're on the side of the poly that you're facing. When they're gray, like right here, that means it's on the other side, but it's showing through. And we did it because it's all flat. So right now, that polygon, even though it has some substance to it, it is essentially flat as a pancake. It's infinitely flat, which causes the back and the front to be in the same place at the same time. And that causes all kinds of issues. So what we can do is go in there and try and delete all that. That didn't work because we didn't get it all flat like we wanted to. So let's back up with Control Z. We essentially don't want, I don't want anything past this line right there. But you can see there's some issues here that would cause more problems if we just deleted all these polys here. We'd have these jagged edges right there. We don't want that either. So we need to back up again. Let's back up to before we did that. Let's reevaluate this. Part of the thing with 3D modeling, even when you know the software and you know what you're doing, it doesn't necessarily mean you can tackle everything. And there's always times where you sit there and you're either troubleshooting because the program is acting up and behaving incorrectly and you're trying to figure out what's causing that. Or you're in this case where you're kind of wanting, you know what you want to do, and then you're trying to come up with ways of doing it without taking hours and hours to actually do it. And I want everything that's selected, I want all those polygons gone. And I want just one layer. But the problem is, like right here, the Turbosmooth did this. It originally was nice and one line down here, but now it pulled these up, and as a result, we've got these vertices selected, but then this one is selected, this row is selected, and then all of a sudden up here you've got all more vertices selected than over here. So if you deleted them all, it would cause it to be jagged, and we don't want that. We need it to be all on the same page. So when we flatten it, flats it nice and smooth. So what else can we do? Well, we can go in there and try to do, we can try edge, and we can go in here, well, maybe border. And ooh, no, it doesn't want to do that. See how it's a white arrow? It's not wanting to select it. It means that somewhere along this line, this edge right here goes through a complex part, a bend or a curve or a crink, and this shape doesn't like to do that for some reason. It's nowhere on this tree can you select a border on that, because it kind of goes down and it terminates. And a border, to click on border, it basically selects a segment right here and automatically selects every segment touching it end to end all the way around the circumference of the object. And it has to be a nice smooth loop, and if there's any kinks in the way, you can't do it. So I can select let's say this one, and I can try loop like we did earlier, and that does select those, but again right there it goes downward. So even if we deleted all of the things below it, we would still have these polys up here that would come down and around, and it just doesn't quite work very well. But it might work better because right now we've got a lot of polys that are right on top of each other. And if we delete everything down, then we just have this one piece here, and it goes all the way around. Really, it's just that spot right there where the kink is. And that's what's kind of fouling up. That one's a fairly consistent. It still goes down, but doesn't go down as dramatically. Same for there. And that one does. That one goes down a lot. So if you delete it, you're going to have all these polys, and then it drops down quite a bit. And it almost becomes flat at that point. So we're going to go ahead and try it. Give this a shot. You can double click each one of these. I'm not used to deleting with edges selected, so I'm kind of curious. I don't think this will do much of anything, but it might. It might just delete the sections there. It did. Interesting. Okay. That's what I was hoping it for to do, to give you basically a gap here. So now, yeah, we deleted more of our tree, and we don't want to delete too much out of there. We might not want to go up quite as high. But now we got all that bottom part separated. And theoretically, we can grab all these vertices on this bottom piece and theoretically pull them down and flatten them, and we should be going good. But right now, we need to delete just the stuff that's separated. And it looks like, did it go all the way through? It did, but there's just a little bit of a gap right there. So we've got to be careful. This is going to be a tricky situation. I'm switching back between L, which is left view, and F, which is front view with the perspective. I'm going to do this. I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm going to drag and select everything down here. I'm going to zoom in and try to get it to where I just have the bottom section. Zoom out when you have wide gap there. Now for this one, because it goes above, this piece goes above the line, we're going to switch to F. It's not looking good either. It goes up above. This is why we need to delete these things, because it's all, you see how wonky it has become. And again, that Turbosmooth really kind of fouled things up. So we're going to do the best we can here. We're going to keep holding that Control and get what we can. Getting as close as we can to that, but we need to get in here and get those last two. Get the last of this little piece. And get that. We got quite a bit there. All this goes. This goes. Oops. If we accidentally select something we don't want, it's Alt and drag. Switch to your perspective mode, P, and then we start scrolling around to make sure where is that. There we are. These are the places. It looks like lipstick. And we want to just get it to where we can hold down Alt and drag over that area. And then we've got that section. Ooh, we can probably, from this vantage point, we can Control, right click a little bit here. And you see what kind of a mess this is? This is all because, yeah, because of Turbosmooth, yeah, to a certain point. But I caused this. I was the one that didn't keep the baseline tight like it should have. And flat. I thought I did, but I didn't. And as a result, you spend a little extra time cleaning it up. But the key to a good modeler, if you're going to get into this industry, it's not, I mean, yeah, part of it is, of course, the talent of being able to model, being able to visualize an image in 3D and create it. But the other half really is the technical side, the problem solving. You've got to be able to look at this issue in front of you, know the tools well enough that you find walkarounds. This may not be the textbook way of doing it. If I went to Disney and I gave them the same exact problem, I would not probably be doing the same entity right here. I would not be going through the same methods. The techniques would probably be something very simpler that Disney would have probably no problems with and get this done real quick. All right, stand by as I think about the rest of this, how I want to do that. Let's see. Okay, I think what I'm going to do here, I think I got everything. Okay, hit delete, cross your fingers. This is why we save. Just in case. All right, now I believe, I don't think there's a way to actually select the vertices around. You recall that the edge, if we go to edge and we double click it, it makes that selection all the way around it. There's kind of a trick that you can do in this. Because I'm not aware of a way to select a vertice and the vertice is able to be selected all the way around like a loop, like the edge does. I'm not familiar with that tool. I don't even think it exists. It may, but I don't think it does. So a trick that you can do is, first of all, you're going to have your move transform type setting open by right clicking that. That gets the thing open. You are going to have to drop down the edge, having it selected like this. You're going to have to move it down on the z-axis a specific distance. You can't eyeball this thing. So we're going to type over here the absolute world. These are the dimensions where that technically exists in the world. So in other words, from zero origin, which we were talking earlier, where my line is here, I'm technically 1.5 millimeters from 0, 0. All right. This section, however, the right section, is the move actually part of it. You can offset it by typing in a destination, a measurement of some kind, 5 millimeters, and it will move in that direction. It's very simple. So right now I'm going to move it down 10 millimeters. I'm going to remember this. It goes quite a ways down. We could have alternatively moved it down less than that and flattened it that way, but I want to show you a different way we can do this. So now that we have this down, we can go back to vertices, and if you go to forward by pushing F, you'll see that it's easily selectable now. All of it's selected. You go back to perspective mode, now you've got all the vertexes selected. And now you can go back, type in the same distance, 10 millimeters, and theoretically it'll go back to where it was. And that way you have a walk around. Again, this isn't a technique that probably is taught in schools. This is just one of the many things that you wind up just saying, okay, I need to do this. I have a deadline. I don't care how I do it. I just want to do it. That's a simple walk around. It takes two moves and you're already there. If you don't know the tools, you find the tools that allow you to do it. So from here, I do want to, now that I've showed you what it is, I'm actually going to do what I was about to do. Bring this back down so that it's quite a ways away from the whole thing. Doesn't matter where, because this is a tree. And I'm going to try to put the z-axis planar again. And I'm going to try and hope that this actually flattens it exactly like it should. We'll see what happens. And it does. Nice and pretty like that. Theoretically, now everything is nice and neat. And if I go back in there and click the right click on the move transform and click the right button to zero out the z-axis, theoretically there should be no vertices, if we scale it, no vertices that are below this row. Just like that. And if we have P, we can actually really see it. Now, we deleted the bottom part, so we've got an empty cavity right here. Now, this is an interesting part, and this is something, apologize for the slight drop there in the pixelation. Here's something that we need to talk about for just a second when it comes to printing. You basically have two different options. One, when you're printing, you can delete the base like it is now, and you will apply a modifier that we've used before called a shell. I'm not going to put it on here because it's probably going to, at this stage, it's probably going to take out my computer. Your computer might be fine. If you apply this shell, I recommend giving it as much time as you think you can. Don't be patient, or don't be impatient rather, when you apply that modifier, because it's going to take a while, probably. It might take upwards of 20-30 seconds of the thing locking up on you, thinking that it's crashed, and it hasn't. Because what it does, if you recall, it takes a paper-thin edge and thickens it. And that will make this what looks to be paper-thin right now. If you look at it, I mean, there is no thickness to this. It's paper-thin. It will make this whole thing have thickness to it, but it will stay hollow. And that's important when it comes to printing, because if you print it with a base closed off, then it will print, then you basically have an option to either print hollow or solid. If you print it solid, you're going to dump a ton of plastic in there. It will be heavy, it will be sturdy, but you will have wasted a tremendous amount of plastic. And unless you're trying to let trucks run this thing over, you don't need that much plastic. It's going to waste it. If you leave it hollow like this, it will not give you the option necessarily of filling it in, but it will put in its own supports, and you'll have to clean that out. So it'll come in here, and there's a good chance it's going to come in there and put some supports in there and try to keep it a little sturdier. You will use far less material if you do it that way. So if you're trying to conserve plastic, making it hollow is a printer's dream. They do like that. You can make just about any object hollow. All you have to do is just delete the base, apply that shell, and then you've got yourself a hollow piece. Let me see here. Checking over my notes what we're going to be doing next. I think the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make it solid, because two reasons. One, because I want to have the option of it to be heavier. I'm not going to put this complete solid object. I'm going to put an infill. Basically, you can set it to a percentage of how much plastic you want in there, and 10% is usually the standard. 10% plastic is filled inside it, and most of it is air, but just enough plastic to keep it solid. Two, the other reason is I plan on making these resin. And if you're going to make these a resin casting, you don't want them to be hollow like this. You can get away with it. It's fine. And theoretically, yeah, you wouldn't be using any less resin, because instead of it being like it is now, you would have a base to it. So you would just have that much more plastic. It would be hollow still inside. Unless you punctured some holes and deliberately filled it with resin, and then you can make it solid. I want it to be basically solid, because when I print this thing off, I want the first layer on my printer to be solid, to have a nice sturdy base to it, and then the rest of it kind of stick to it. If the testing sucks and it doesn't work that way, then fine. I'll delete the base, throw a shell on this thing, and reprint it off and just live with it. To make this base, real simple. Click on a border, okay? And the border actually is already selected because we had the edges already selected earlier. See how that is in? It's already selected from the last time. There's one simple button on borders when you want to close off an opening. It's very, very simple. There's a button over here called cap, right there. And you click cap, and it caps it for you. Just like that. Bada bing, bada boom. And now all of a sudden I got a solid object. Alright, now that we've done that, I'm going to save this one more time as a special file, because I've done things to it. I'm going to try one other thing with it, and then we're going to put the peg in and adjust it a couple times, call it good. I want to see, now that I've got the bumpiness of the bark, I want to see if I can pull off some spikiness in the tree. I don't think it's going to work, mainly because the quality, the way the style is, it's kind of got a Disney, almost cartoonish look to it. And if I put any, needle-like spikes to it, I just don't think it's going to be, they'll be too uniformed. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If I go back to deformation, click on push pull, I want to make sure my brush size is much smaller than it was. I want it to be like 1, yeah. Want it to be more than 2, we'll go 5. And we're going to give this a shot. And see what happens. This time, that definitely, I don't think that's enough. Because that's going to just look that may look weird. Let me see what it does. It's just not one even. Here we go. Oop. Is there an issue? Oh, there we go. I have to move it now. Yeah. You have to move it quite a ways. And that's because the size, the reason why it's not popping up just everywhere is because of the size of the polys. So if I want to do this one poly, it doesn't want to do it. I have to go over like those and multiple polys, and then won't just do one. We'll do several. And I don't know. That may look cool if I can go and do that everywhere. I may do that off camera because that's just ridiculously tedious, and that would take hours for me to do. So I may do that off camera just to kind of see what it looks like. I have a feeling that will make it look like it's crystals. And that's definitely not what I want. So we're going to back this thing up. Back it up some more. Can I still back up? Yes. There we go. That's why we have 40 different undos. All right. what are we going to do here? We're going to try to, you know what? I'm going to back up a little bit, because what we're going to do is we need to build first a plane. And what we're going to do with this, the whole object of this little tree cluster is that I want it to be able to fit and work well on a battle map. And assuming the battle map is 1-inch grid, okay? We're not going to make it any custom anything else other than that. Now, problem is we've been using millimeter up to this point. We're going to print off in millimeters. We can't use inches, but we can convert real quick. And basically, we do a quick millimeter to inches on Google. We type in 1 inch, and it says 25.4 millimeters is 1 inch. So that is what we're going after. So theoretically, a plane, and cancel these two lengths out, so it's just one piece. If we go in there and say 25.4, 25.4, that is an inch, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, and it can, and remember we've scaled this already, so if we know that if it says that's an inch, it's an inch. So now what we're going to do is 4, 5, 6. Let's just do 6, and then okay, something like this. All right, so this is a 4 by, what is that, 6, 7, 4 by 7. Let's go up to, we're going to put these together so that they're one thing. Honestly, I just did it like this way, but if you want to do the math beforehand and know what 25.4 is, and then you multiply it, you know, times 7 and then times 4, and then you'll get your length and width. You can go back to your plane and you can theoretically, you know, type in your, just pull out, drag out your plane, and then you can type in your actual length and width. Let's say, let's say it's, what is that, 200, 100 and something. Let's just say 125 by 200. Let's just say that's what it is. Then you can go in there and add your segments here. 5, that's 6, that's 7, and that's 4. So theoretically, if you had your length and width exactly as it should be to the measurement, if you've done your math, then those, each segment, each block there would be 1 inch. Alternatively, you can go in there, turn the plane, hit your snap tool, turn that on. If you've already got this already set up and you want it to be one piece, you can just drag that right over it. And now you've got a perfect piece that's one piece that has segments already on it, 4 by 7. And you can get rid of all of those too. So this is where we need to make a decision. And essentially, when we're making these pieces, let's see, unhide the door of house. Okay, so putting that piece next to it, you see just how disproportionate these pieces are. Now, this one, that house is scaled to where I want it, because I personally wanted the front door to be about the same size as a typical Mini. So I'm okay with that size. It's going to be a large piece on the battle map. So this piece will have to fit onto a rather large scale battle map, not something that would be like what Paizo makes, that are those little, 5 by 7 or 6 by 10 cards that are just thin cardboard pieces. This was going to have to be on something really large. But this one, however, hide that. This one needs to be to where it's going to be used for terrain and usable terrain, something to hide behind so the people can have partial coverage and coverage. So it needs to fit on here. Now the question is, do I make it? Let me make it a copy. In order to do what I just did, hold down Shift and drag, and that'll make a copy. And you want a copy because we don't want to make any changes to the original one. Yeah, one of the things that has been suggested to me, and I wholeheartedly agree to it. One of the options I'm thinking that it may be is I'm going to try possibly to make this either the base here hollow, or I'm going to make it so that the top pops off. And you can do that by just slicing, making a slice right there and putting some male and female in so that it pops in and pops out and it gets stuck. That way you can just pop this top off. There'll be a little ledge inside here, just inside underneath the house window. And shoot, you could even try one down here behind the door if you wanted to, but mainly around the window. And the idea is to put a little, one of those little tea lights, the LEDs, of course, not the real candles. That is definitely not what you want to put inside this thing. This plastic we use, PLA, has a very low melting point. You're talking, a couple hundred degrees and it's already melted. So you definitely don't want to put a light, put a flame next to this stuff. You'll have some issues. But you could put a little, those LED ones, and put it right there, and then have it illuminate, and then bang, close the lid, and now all of a sudden you got, someone's home. A lot of these things are going to have it. That's a great idea. I'm glad he suggested on that because I'm totally going to rock it. So that'll be a feature. But for this one, do we scale it? How much we scale it by? I don't want to put, we're going to, in the game terms, typically 1 inch on these type of battle maps, 1 inch equals 5 feet in the game. 5 feet is a typical space in which a person can comfortably stand and not be too crowded. So obviously, some trees can be that short in diameter, and a lot of them are way bigger than that. Depends on what you want to do. After autosave. There we go. If we go to P, and then if we build a cylinder, and the cylinder again, 25 millimeters tall is the typical size, and then 12.5 is the typical radius because it's usually about 25 millimeters in diameter is your typical base for these guys. And if we stand them right next to each other, it's a mini tree. It looks like it's a little midget. I mean, that person is almost as tall as a tree, but the important thing is, if you look from the other side, in game terms and rule terms, that person's covered, he's hidden, he's got concealment, and that's the part of the game. So theoretically, that will be enough, but you see that it's taking up a couple other spaces nearby. So the nice thing is you could rotate this so that it doesn't take up one of the spaces, like if you had some blank spaces down here and it was more convenient to do that, or if pieces were up here, you could also move the thing so that it isn't, it doesn't necessarily stand there, it's off to one side. But the idea is that something like that would be where you would go. You'd put it on that side, and then if he moves, let's say to over here, well, then you just physically, not that way, rotate this bad boy 180 degrees roughly and move them over to one side. But I'm a bit concerned because this thing just has a little bit too much left hangover. So what we're going to do is see what this thing looks like if it's, I think that if we make it, like that. Then we can actually scale it. Rotate it just enough where it's inside. See, those roots are definitely getting in the way there. And now it's a little bit bigger, not by much, but now it's a little bit bigger, and you could move this piece on either direction all the way around. You've got, well, and if it's moved up, you know, in the center here, now you've got much more room to move around in this whole area because it's not interfering. And then the idea is that if you actually do move into this area, then you simply lift this thing off the board, and then you're good to go. The problem is with this piece being there, then you're going to have, I preferably would like to have a peg that fits into one of these holes as an option. Or you can sink a magnet into it. It'd be like a depression right here, and you drop a magnet, glue it, and that way this thing snaps onto the place and doesn't move anywhere, and then you just pop it right off. If that's the case, this would need to have a female in, that would need to have a female in as well. You'd put the two magnets in each depression, glue them, and then they would snap together. So there's going to be two different options, a male, a female in, and then a female in. And that should take care of everybody. The nice thing about it is these files are immaterial. If I make slight adjustments to them, it caters to the person who's printing. So I don't have a problem with making alteration files and just name them correctly, and then whenever they download them, they just pick the one they want based upon their chosen preference and move on from there. So I am going to go with the route at this point. I think it'd be easier for now to do the male-female end. And then what we can do is flip. We literally can take this piece here by selecting polygon as your choices. You can actually select this, and you would detach it from the body, and you would flip it. And so the male end that would stick down would actually be sticking vertically up, and you would have that little hole, that little depression would automatically be there. So that'd be an easy way to fix it. The problem is you'd still have to go back in there and select all of the vertices, which you can at one time, and then click weld to weld this piece back to the main body, because you're going to have to detach it. If you just flip it right now, I mean, if I go in there and there's a mirror button right here, that essentially mirrors the object, and it basically flips on its axis, either vertically, sideways. It just mirrors it. But the problem is, if you point that, it's not going to do it just on that selected poly. It's going to do it on the entire object. Case in point, just like that. And it basically just flips it in a different direction, the opposite direction. So that's not the way to do it. You then go instead to detach, which is up here on the upper right-hand corner when you have polygon selected. Up here, right up here. And you click that, it detaches that polygon. And everything you have selected, it detaches it from the main body and makes it its own physical object. Then you flip it. Then you attach it back to its original spot. So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to make the piece that juts out. And actually, to do this, we are going to delete this bottom piece entirely and make it a different piece. And I'll show you why in a second. Right now, we have no piece inside here, and there's no segments in here. There's nothing we can grab to extrude. We can extrude this whole piece here if we want to, but that's not what we want. We don't want that shape. We just want a simple cylinder in the middle to come downward as like a peg. And in order to do that, what we need to do is we need to use splines. Splines, we've used that in the past. It's a line essentially just basically line like you'd see in AutoCAD, and it can be created to make a physical model like this, a mesh in this regard, once you take the right steps. And this is how we do it. So we delete the poly. We have it selected, delete it, it's become hollow again. Right now, I want to make a shape that is exactly the shape as this base is, following the contours so that it would fit perfectly back onto it, because we're going to make a shape and snap it back on to the main body after we're done with this. So we go to either border or edge, doesn't matter, and we click and make sure that we've got just that bottom edge selected, nothing else. Okay? One of the cool things that you could do with splines from a mesh is that you can actually make a spline from a part of a mesh. And in order to do that, once you have this selected, you go down into your cluster of edit borders, which we've used in the past, chamfer, extrude, familiar tools that we've used already. One of which is the big button down below. It says create shape. This thing will create a spline. And you can see that the line just turned blue on me. Now I still have the edges selected from the main body, and if I move downward, you can see that I'm still moving that down. I still have that selected, but you can see the blue line is still in its place. That is a separate object, completely isolated by itself, independent from the object. Let's deselect this, and then we can actually go in there and select it. If we isolate by right-clicking anywhere on the screen and going to isolate section, we can get a better look and see that we've actually got a spline that is exactly the same shape as the base of our tree. This is important because we can add a circle to it, a circle spline, and attach it to it. And then once we make it a model, a mesh again, that circle will carve out a circle out of the entire filled shape. Let me show you what I mean. Switch to top view. We go to the Create Panel tab up in the upper right. It's the farthest one from the left. And in order to go to the spline, this first item gives you the geometry. These are all the physical shapes, the three-dimensional shapes that you can do, the sphere, the pyramid, etc. The one to the right of this tab, this feature, this choice, are your splines. It even says so right there at the top. It gives you the name of what you're on, so you know you're in the right spot. We want a circle. And it doesn't matter what shape or what size this circle is. It actually doesn't even matter what shape, for that matter. If you want to make it a triangle as a peg, you go for it. You can do that. You can make it whatever shape you want. But it is important to make note of how big you're making it. Doesn't matter what size, and I would recommend not itty-bitty like this. I generally like the little bigger ones so that it tends to fit. Seems like if you have a small peg and it goes into a small hole, it's tough to actually get it into there. But if you've got a big peg and you're going into a big hole, it's easier to fit in there. You just think of when we were kids and we were putting blocks into holes. The bigger blocks were easier to handle than the smaller blocks. So when we look over here on the right, you'll see your parameters. Sorry, I'm trying to get my mouse to cooperate here. And the radius here is radius, not the diameter, because there is no diameter in this program. Everything is radius. You're going to have to remember that, because diameter kind of threw me off several times when I was making a cylinder, and I thought I had it at 25 millimeters, and it was actually at 50 millimeters because I typed in the radius section. And rate 2 radius makes a diameter. It's from the central point outward is a radius, across is a diameter. And there, like I said, no diameters in 3D Studio Max. It does not recognize diameters, only recognize radius. It's very similar to CAD in a way in that regard. Although there is diameters, I think you can do that. So for here, I want a nice even number. So I'm going to make it 5. That's the radius of the circle right now. Now I can remember that pretty well. And when I make the female end in the base that we're going to be making, I know that I have a 5 millimeter peg that's coming in. And it's important not to make the same size hole. It will not fit when you print it. I've proven this time and time again. If you make it even just a slightly bit bigger, there's a good chance it's not going to fit. You need to put at least, I almost usually go as much as like 0.3 millimeters, which still doesn't seem like much, but that's significant enough. I put it at like 0.3 or even 0.4, and then it just fits right in there just fine. When we go to P, we can actually see that it drew it on the origin. And we're drawing, which is real weird because I was pretty sure we were not drawing on the origin. I thought we were. Shame, know my name. Oh, that's right, because when if we go to end isolation, which is right here, right click anywhere on the screen to bring your menu up, go to end isolation, we'll see that actually that was the copy of the original, which is fine because I want it to be that size. I don't want to be that big. I'm ready to shrink this thing down. In fact, we can hide that one out of the way because that'll be our master copy. But all of this is way above the line, and we want that to be 0. Theoretically, we need that to be 0 as well, so everything is on the same page. Let's name this little tree, and we're going to hide it out of the way because we're just going to make the base for now. We don't need this tree for a while. So over here on the right, you'll see the name and color, and right now it's default to cylinder 002. And instead, we're going to name it tree, actually, and an SM for small. A lot of times in 3D, people have a tendency, and I don't know why, but I guess it just seems to work that way, tendency of writing the first word small letters, all lowercase, and then instead of putting necessarily an underscore next to it, they capitalize the second word. And it may, and I'm guessing it may be the naming scheme that some of the game engines, for programming purposes, it may be necessary. I'm not sure, but it seems to be a very common way for programmers and artists in the gaming field to be able to do it, that type of naming convention. I personally will do either one, but for now, tree SM is fine. Let's hide this bad boy. Now we got just this. Let's change the color. Again, we can just select it. Instead of being plain 02, we can just select this little picture here and just pick a color so it's different than what we got. Awesome. That's really bright. That's even brighter. Let's do blue. Woo! Still hurts, but that's okay. It's the best I can do. But we can at least see that line now pretty well. So the outer line here and the inner circle are on the same exact plane. This is absolutely critical. Okay? If we're going to merge these two pieces that I have selected together to make them one, if you do not have both of these pieces on exactly the same plane, and when I say same plane, I mean if you hit F for front, Z for zoom, and zoom out, if it is not absolutely spit on the line there, it will attach, but then when you make it, if you extrude it, or if you make it into a physical 3D object, if you make it, with mass, it will look awful. It will actually have artifacts. The polygons will be terrible. In fact, I'll even show you. If we move it up like that, so it's not on the same plane, we select either one of these shapes to attach. Go over to your modifier tab. It's the second one from the top on the left. And then in the right-hand column and towards the top, you see the word attach. You click attach. You move over to the spline. It will change the cursor to a circle with a couple of circles next to it, an arrow. If the cursor does not do this, if it does not change to that, it means it cannot be attached. Things you cannot attach spline to. A mesh. This geometric plane that it sits on right now, that's geometry. That is considered in some software it's called a primitive. In others, it's very commonly referred as geometry. That is a plane. Okay, it's a physical, solid object, as opposed to these, which are just lines. They have no mass to them yet. So you have to join a spline to a spline, and the only way to do it is by making sure that icon pops up. When I click on it, it's attached. No problem. It likes that. It's fine with that. But if I deselect attach and then click on my extrude button, this will theoretically make it reach out and have some mass to it. And you can already tell it looks wonky. And if I hit F3, you can see how just absolutely crappy that looks. It looks like a volcano that is a cousin, and that we have to keep it in the attic because it embarrasses our, visitors and things like that. And we're kind of embarrassed by it. It's definitely not what we want. Now, can we fix this from this point? Yes, we can. You do not have to delete the extrude modifier. You do not have to detach the pieces together and then reattach them later on. You can do this all together right now. Makes it easy when you're working off the 0 axis like we've been doing all this project, because you go down to the lower hierarchy of this, the lower one, the editable spline. It automatically turns off the extrude because according to the software, you are now at the stage before the extrude happens. So to its care, extrude doesn't even exist. It never happened. It's never going to happen. Right now you're on edit spline. You're in the past. You've time traveled into the past. And now you can actually click this little arrow, which drops down similar selections like the geometry that we have. Instead of vertex, edge, border, and polygon, we've got vertex, segment, and spline. Spline selects, when you click on it, it selects the entire spline. You can kind of see it. It's all red. Segment does just between vertices. One little segment. That's the similar thing as edge. It's the same thing. And then vertex, you know what that does. It selects one of these millions of dots that goes around the corner. What we want to do, we want to select spline. And after it autosaves and we stretch, we want to select the one that's not behaving correctly. The other one, the other lower piece, is at the 0 axis. When that's fine. That's where we want it to be. We want this one up top to go down to the 0. So again, we right-click the move and select and move tool, and all you got to do is right-click the Z number. From 9, it automatically drops to 0. This is so important. Why we work on the 0 axis. Things like this eliminate the need for math and planning and things like that. You know it was at the 0. You know now it is spot on the same line as the other one. These are together, and now if we close out the edit spline by clicking editable spline, closing out the little arrow, and clicking on extrude, now it knows, okay, I'm back into the present. Extrude is now invoked. Where do you want it to go? Right now it's at 0 right here, the amount. It hasn't extruded at all because we haven't told it how much. So it's going to be basically just a flat plane. Right now we want it to extrude, let's say, I don't know, 5 millimeters. And it pops out like that. Something like that. Now, here's the issue. We don't want it to be, we're making a male end, we're not making a female end. That's kind of an issue because, quite frankly, right now it's technically a female end. And if we put that on the base of the tree, especially around here on the roots, where the roots come down at a slope, the roots are going to cut right into that thickness. Even if we made it thinner, it's still going to be that way. So what do we do here? Well, what we do is we isolate so that we just have this piece here, because this is all we really need to worry about right now. And instead of it, we can kill the extrude. I just wanted you to see what it does in that regard. But if you kill the extrude button, you can actually go down and go to spline. And this is a feature that I don't use very often because it doesn't really need to, but sometimes this works actually pretty well. But basically what we want to do is we want to make what we want to do is essentially make it so that it just makes I want to show. I'll show you this way real quick, but then I've got another way that I just thought of that makes it even easier, and that's what we're looking for. Always easy. The reverse button right here is a neat little feature, and you saw how it filled in all this area because it believes that this is the inner circle, that's the outer circle. You can actually reverse this, and then when you go into extrude, it does the exact same thing because I did not do the outer as well. You gotta select both. I think this does it. Nope, nope, both. Ah, leave it to that time when I'm on the spot. It doesn't cooperate the way it should. Basically, what that reverse button does when it's actually behaving properly, but I guess I built it too well and it doesn't do it. But instead of it going outward like this, and this is solid, it actually will make just this circle extrude and just this edge extrude. So in other words, it would just be like that. It would jut out just like that, and just be the outline of the shape. It wouldn't be a solid object. And then you could go on from there. But what we're actually going to do is we're going to turn this into an edible poly. Oh, there we go. F3 makes it solid again. This is the thickness that we want. We don't want actual thickness on the base of the tree because it is going to be the flat bottom part of the tree. So from this, though, we can do all kinds of work. We can drop down the poly because right now it's considered a solid. It's no longer a spline. We have killed the spline idea, even though it's still down there hiding underneath us. If we wanted to deselect or turn off by putting this arrow or this eyeball, if you want to turn off the arrow, it turns it back to a spline if we want to. But right now it's a poly. We want to drop down and select border. And we want to go down and select just the inside, and because we're going downward, we want it to be a male end. We can hold down shift and we can pull down the edges here to make part of the male end. Alternatively, you could have used the extrude button and told it how much you wanted to go down. If you wanted to go down 5 millimeters, you could just type it in and it would do the same thing. Now, with the same tool, that's why I picked the border instead of the edge. With the same tool selected, with border and this border edge selected, we did this just a second ago. We did use the cap tool. That's over here amongst the edit borders in this area, the familiar area that we've been using a lot, above the connect, which splits segments and polygons into multiple pieces. The cap button, you click it one time, seals it right off. Okay? Deselect everything by selecting edible potting, and now we've got the base piece with a peg. This will be fused up to the bottom of the tree, and then you'll have your little peg that will fit into the hole that we're going to make here in a second. Now, the nice thing about this is we can copy this now that we have it separated. We can copy this now as make it a duplicate, and we can flip it now to where it is a female end So instead of it pointing down, it goes up into the tree, and then save that separately, so that we would automatically will have two trees, one with a male end, one with a female end, and then that will be available. So in order to make a copy, I showed you earlier that you can just hold down Shift, drag something over, and it makes a copy. And it gives you the option to copy or make an instance. But we don't want it to move because we want to kind of keep it in the same area because it's perfectly lined up right now with the tree that's hidden. And we can make a duplicate of the tree that's hidden as well and copy that to this secondary base that we're about to make. So for right now, let's make a copy of this one. And in order to do that, you go up to Edit. We haven't gone up here before. You go up to Edit. You go down to Clone. Control V is the shortcut, but honestly, with Control V, it's kind of confusing because most of us want to think it's paste. It's not. It's clone. You push clone. It does the same option that comes up. It gives you the option of whether to instance or to copy it. In this case, we want to copy it. We don't want to instance it because we're going to be making changes to this one, and we don't want the original copy to be changed as well. Don't worry about the name for now. Now that we've got this piece set up, if you move it up, there's a copy. It makes the copy exactly on top of itself. So keep in mind, if you accidentally make a copy, make a clone, and it's on top of the same piece, make sure you've got one of them moved out of the way eventually, because you're going to be trying to, weld vertices and things like that, and this is going to spit it back because you're technically got two objects on top of itself. For now, we're going to hide one of them. But before we do that, let's name it. Now, even though I said ignore the name, let's name it. Just because if you've got a complicated scene and you've got a whole bunch of objects in your scene, it's kind of hard to find because you can actually make thousands of objects in your scene, and it gets confusing if they're all called boxes and objects and shapes. We've only got a handful of objects in this scene. It's not that difficult for me to find exactly what I need, but it's good practice. You can name it tree base. We'll do it the old way. Tree base. And this time we'll call it female. Okay? Now we do that mirror, and it splits on this option of which way you want it to move to mirror it. You can mirror it in a whole different number of ways, but the way we're wanting to do it is we want it to be exactly where it was, but we want it to point upwards. So we do the z-axis because then it flips it basically right here straight up, so it's pointing upwards on the z. And if you want to make alternatively, what we could have done, instead of making the clone, you could have actually mirrored this bottom piece, and then instead of when it comes to this option, you can actually click copy, and it would make the copy up here and leave the original down here. So let me show you that real quick. So we delete that, so we just have one. We just have one object right here. Okay. You can go up to mirror. It's this button right up here in the middle. It's right next to the align tool. We used that earlier to where you can align things to another object. The mirror tool, you click that. Select the Z because we want to go vertically. We want to flip it upside down, so it's up there. Right now, it just basically flipped the same object. So now it's just flipped vertically. But if we go down here and make a clone selection as copy, it makes the bottom one. So that we have two pieces. You could do either way. You can either clone it and then mirror the clone without a copy, or you can mirror the original and make a clone in this regard. It's pretty simple. Now that we have this piece, of course, we deleted that one, so we need to rename it. So tree base female. And now it's that one with a female part. Hide this one because we don't need it for right now. We're going to leave that alone. We're going to end the isolation. We really don't need this piece anymore, this plane, so let's hide that. We're going to unhide the tree that we had just a second ago. We need to right click to bring up this menu, It's the same one that you went to isolate selection and to insel isolate. It's the same one that allows you just to see one object at a time. It temporarily hides everything. We want to unhide by name. If you go to unhide by all, which is unfortunately right underneath the option that we typically use, I don't like how they have this thing right here, because if I have 4 million things that are saved and are hidden, all of them are hidden. If I accidentally click this instead of clicking unhide by name, it unhides everything. And suddenly I've got 4 million things in my scene, and it may just not be looking pretty. So be sure when you click on unhide by name, it gives you a list of all the objects in your scene. Fortunately, we only have a couple of things, so it's really easy to find. The box that I had, that is the original box I made to show you the dimensions of my printing space. The cylinder is the little 25 millimeter figure to make me show that I have everything to scale. You know what the dwarf house is, the plane we just hid. It shows the grid. The small tree is what we're needing to hide. So we click on unhide, and there she is. And see how it's already fit perfectly? It's matched absolutely perfectly to the base of the tree. That's pretty. But we still have to conform. We have to attach these two pieces together. And in order to do that, we do it one of two ways. You can take the main piece and attach it to the base, or you can select the base and attach it to the main piece. It doesn't sound like that's big of a deal. Who cares? It makes a huge deal, and this is why. If you have a ton of modifiers still available on your list over here in the hierarchy, which we do with the main tree, we can still turn back the clock, turn off the Turbosmooth, and actually retreat all the way back to the cylinder to when we first started building this tree if we wanted to. We could turn all that back, and we just have a cylinder before the tree is. In other words, we still have editable features and options for that tree. If we used the base, which only has editable poly and editable spline, and attached it to the tree, it takes the tree and adopts it to whatever the original object you have selected. Whatever these modifiers are, that's what it adopts to the other ones. You will lose all of this. All this will go away, and you will have just this if you select the base and select and attach it to the tree. So it's important to always take the object that you don't want to eliminate, all the options, and attach it to whatever you need. And it sounds stupid because you think that you'd want to attach it, the base, to the objects, and you would think that you would be attaching it to the main tree, and then therefore the tree would be the one that's being attached to. No, it's not the case. It's stupid that way. So we grab the tree. We have edit poly. It doesn't matter which edit poly we have. We just need an editable poly, and it's usually the top one is the best one. And then we go down to attach. It was over here on the spline in the right-hand column. It's down here in the geometric version. That's only because there's a lot more things here. So we want to attach. Got this thing selected. We have attach, and then we attach the base. Notice that when we right-click and deselect the attach, we still have all of our choices. And now the interesting part is that because we used this specific edit poly to attach this, now if we actually turn off this edge, check this out. We not only turn off the bark, but we turn off that piece there. And it's back to being a solid object, which is what we were at before we started to make this work tonight. If we turn it back on, it comes back to life. Just like that. Problem is, we still don't have those two pieces together. So what we need to do is we need to weld vertices. And this is why it's very important to have a flat base when you're doing this. We want to select vertex, because remember we have just a ton. Look at all these vertices. If you zoom out, look how blue that is. That's how many vertices there are. There's so many on this thing. But because we were smart and pulled it down just a tad bit, we're going to go in there and we can select all the vertices on the base. We've pulled it down just a tad bit so that we could have a little bit of separation between the main tree and it. And that way it allows us for easy selecting the baseline. Now, we'll switch it to P. We need to go and double check because sure enough, because this circle initially was on the same plane as this shape when we were making our spline, as a result, these vertices got selected. And this is why you always want to check this. And because you might accidentally select the wrong vertice. So in that regard, we want to have F3. Hold down Alt, drag over the unwanted vertices, making sure that the background back behind the thing is not having any of these red ones. So we can just deselect that area. And now we just have what we want. Pretty simple there. All right. Let's see here. On the right here side, in your panel, you will see just how many vertices you have selected. And right now, I have 2,882 vertices selected. Okay? Now, if we did our math correctly, if we did all of our work right now there is exactly 2 vertices for every 1 space. Every place we see a vertex in this screen, there are 2 vertices because the base is still separate from the main tree and we need to get rid of them. So we're going to click weld, and this is the one time we're actually going to click just the word weld and not the settings button because we're going to see if it works. The problem is, and we're going to have to probably back up and show you the other way. See how close these vertices are right now? Look how close they are. Even though that it's supposed to just weld the vertices that are on top of each other, there is a threshold where if the vertice that is its neighbor, in other words, this vertice right here and the one next to it, if it's close enough, if it's within its threshold, it will then merge to that one as well. And if you do that, then theoretically all of these vertices right here might weld together. And that looks bad. Let's see what happens. After we autosave, which is probably a good thing, we're just going to click weld and see what happens. Watch the birdies. Now, on my screen, I didn't see anything happen. It didn't look like it did much. And that looks fine, but if you look over at the number of vertices we have selected, it says 2011. And that's not right. We had 2,882 vertices. Theoretically, there should be 1,441 vertices selected right now because we just theoretically would have merged for half. We didn't do that. And that means that some of them didn't work. And that's not good. So we're going to have Control Z to bring it back. Hit P. We already are in perspective. And we're going to try the other button, the weld settings. Now, this is why I usually use the settings button in everything. Again, I've told you before, the settings button for every one of these tools usually gives you more control than just pushing the button. Right here, it actually gives you a truer estimate. Right now, it says that I actually have 73,995 vertices selected. Now, that sounds a bit closer, because 2,882 vertices selected does not sound quite the same if you look at these. But then again, that doesn't look like 73,000 vertices either, does it? No, it doesn't. So it does tell you, though, the before and after. And this is that threshold that I was telling you about, the 0.1 millimeter. And you want to zoom in when you're doing this. Doesn't matter where, just some area where it's clustered of these vertices. And you want to increase the threshold by clicking this. And you can see the numbers going down every time I click on upward. Now what you're doing here is you're not looking at the number. You're actually looking at the physical model itself above. And you just probably saw a bunch of vertices disappear. And some vertices move over to the side. Let's do that again. Make it easier. I'm going to back up. See how many of those vertices that are just sitting there? There's a lot of them. Then I go up and watch what they do. They all disappear and they go away. Now, personally, I can tell you exactly why there's unnecessary vertices here. And it really sucks. When you make a spline, and I'm going to back out of here for a second, and it'll automatically be selected next time when I come back here, but I'm going to do this real quick. When you make a line or a circle, something like that, and you add edit spline like we did earlier, there are 4 vertices in a circle. If you make a line and then add an edit spline on it, there are 2 vertices, one on either end. Okay? The problem is if you take not a straight line but a curve, a spline has geometry built into it. It has what's called a Bezier curve system. And we can get into this later. We don't have to get into this now, but just for right now, it basically allows me to move and make the curve flexible. Okay? That's what a spline can do. It allows you to make pretty little curvature, French curves, things like that. The problem is when you make it into a poly, it doesn't know how to make a curve like that. All it knows how to do is make polygons, squares that are joined at the ends to make an object. Well, it knows that it has to make vertices at the ends of every polygon. And that's why there is now, where there were 4 vertices, and now you see there's actually what should be probably 16 and maybe 28. 28 vertices around that. It's just based upon how it calculates and how it conforms into, basically, because polygons are straight line, or straight. There are no curved polys. And it takes a bunch of straight polys to make a curve like this. So, going back to what we were at earlier, when we made the spline from the base of this tree, it automatically made curves based upon how it knew, because a spline can make a curve very nicely, nice smooth Bezier curve. When we converted it back to a polygon, it didn't know how to do the vertices. So instead, it put all of these ridiculous number of vertices in between the polys. We don't need these polys at all. They are, in fact, if we go to one of them and move it down, it's a part of the base, but it's not a part of the tree. There is nothing for those polys, those extra vertices. There's nothing for it to actually conform to. So it's complete waste of time to have those up there. And unfortunately, this is going to be one of the things that I'll do later, because again, it's going to be tedious. But hitting Control Z to go back. One of the things you're going to have to do to keep this clean is you can go in there and do a target weld, which is over here on the right. And you can go in there and actually drag this one vertice over to the nearest piece. Oop, I'm sorry. That was horrible of me moving there. I basically moved this vertice from here to there, and it fused those two vertices together. Now it is apart. That one vertice has fused together with this one and has made a connection from this piece down to the base. You would have to do that to all of these, which are hundreds. Don't do that. Okay? Don't waste your time. What you do, very simply, is you click polygon, you click the base. Okay? We made that spline so that we would have a easy way of fusing this cylinder to the tree. We have done that, but now we can get rid of this base because, well, quite honestly, it's not necessary because we have an out. What we can do now, I believe, unless it just totally screws up, we can click on border. It has already got the outline set up. And if we click on cap, it's going to seal that whole base off like we saw it earlier. But the problem is we don't want it to seal it completely off. We want it to have this hole around it. So what we do is we move inside, hold down control, also select the edge of the cap. So now we have both of them together. Theoretically, as we wind down the end of our 2-hour segment again, theoretically, if I clip this cap, all will be well. Hold on to your butts. Here we go. And look at that. Some days you just want to be happy that it works. And now, if we move this up and down, watch this. It's already attached to the tree. And if we move this piece, it brings the base down with it. It's not separate. And if we go in there and, at least I hope so. Oh, it is. Well, that is a wonderful way to end it right there, is to find out that it didn't quite work the way you wanted it to. Sometimes that cap works really well, and sometimes it doesn't work at all. I thought for surely it would have worked right there. So we're going to back out of there, and we'll try another option. This usually doesn't work at all. This usually just kills a computer because Bridge does not like when there's more polygons up here and there's less polygons down here. This tool over here called Bridge does not like to work. And usually it makes it really ugly, but I'm going to show you what it looks like. You click on that, and that's what it does. See how it crisscrosses? It doesn't know where to fuse polys because there's no place for the polys to go. It's a way to seal it off, but it's not a good way of doing it. So you can go back and do the target weld if you want to, but what I'm going to do is think of something how to do it. There's always a way to do things around here. But yeah, basically what you're trying to do, and the problem is this circle simply does not have enough polygons. I mean, you could theoretically go in there, and I guess you could go in here. If I did it later, if I go back and do the circle, if I do this circle again, I know that there's 736 edges available around this whole base. Okay? In order for that bridge to work, I would need 736 polygons. These of this cylinder right here, would need to have 736 edges all the way around it. That way, when you did bridge, it would have a polygon for every polygon. And that's pretty much what I would probably go ahead and do right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the border here. There's 28 segments. So we're going to do a little math here. And how many did I say earlier? 736, I think. 760. That's 764. Is that really what the number was? Okay, there he goes. Let me double check here. 736. Okay, that's what I thought. All right. So if we bring up and we have 736, the cylinder right now, we're going to keep this, trying to keep this cylinder, and the whole idea is to multiply the number of segments. We're going to split these polygons in such a way that we're going to have 736 segments after we're done here. So if we do 736 and we divide by 28, excuse me, 26. So each segment would have to have a little over 26 pieces. So we'll see if that even happens. So we're going to go border, select the, we're going to remove the base. We can always cap that later. All we need to do right now, we're just trying to split this cylinder. Well, actually what we could do, yeah, instead of splitting this up, we just make a cylinder and then attach it to it. We've already got this cylinder made. This is the dimension we want. We just need it to have 736 segments to it. So what we can do, and we just need we can do a cylinder, and we basically, we make a cylinder, and then we go to edge down below because we want to do it from edge to edge. And we want to make it pretty much the same size as we had it. We can go back to here, go back to poly. We can delete all of these because that's part of the original attached piece there. But now that we've got this piece here, we go to it. We go, before we make it editable poly and all this is where we've got to actually tell it to do what we want to do. So we've got the length, the height rather. We need to turn off the height segments because we don't need any height segments. We just need it to be the length. And then here's where we're going to try to put 736 and hope that it doesn't kill the computer. Let's find out. Because if we put 736, that will be the number of sides that this cylinder will have, and that's the same number of sides as the tree has. 200 is as max as you can go. Well, that's wonderful. All right, 200 it is. What happens if we put a Turbosmooth on? It does that. Sweet. Okay, well, when we put on, and it'll smash, when we delete the top and the bottom and select border, it is right at 200. So, and if we go in there, select top and the bottom, try connect. That will double it, so that's 400. It actually says right here, if you look on the right. That makes it 400. If we do it one more time, it'll make it 800, which I think that will kill the computer. Nope. Let's check it. Oops. Didn't do that right. Let's try that again. Select, select. It has 400 right now. Now, if we click on OK, and then we click on that, it's at 600. So now we have 600 faces or faces on there. This is why it's really kind of a pain to be putting this peg here, but you know, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to see if we can do it. This is kind of the experimental thing. It says 1200 now because we've got two at the top and bottom selected, but if we had one, it would be 600. We need 700. We need 136 more faces, edges made, and that does make it a little bit of a difficulty. But we can try with 600 and see how it matches, because it may actually not do quite so bad. Let's attach the cylinder. Let's go back to our border. We've got that one selected, the bottom of the tree, the top of the ring, and then let's see what it does. It's probably not going to be very good, but let's see what it happens anyway. That's not too half bad. It's still got some issues, like right there. You can see that the face, you see how those are stretched out past it? It's really close to being able to pull it off. Even though that's a lot of polys down there, it's still doable. And again, it's not, I mean, that's kind of tough to get this out because you've got a lot of polys. Alternatively, this is something you could have done at an earlier stage. And this is something I'll probably go back to doing. In other words, I can turn off that. I can turn off the Turbosmooth. I can go to this section. It'll pop up and say basically a warning saying, do you really want to go that far? Because you've got things that have been modified above you. And if you go and add another edit poly where I'm at right now, it will completely ruin all of the modifiers above it. You will not be able to recover the ones above it. If you click on them again, they will completely foobar your model, and you'll have to just delete them anyway. So you're always wanting to be careful how far you go back down. But I would just delete. Unfortunately, there we go. Unfortunately, I'd have to go back in here and do the bark, but I'm going to do that offline, along with the needles. And I will put all the bark back on. And then on Monday, I will have everything ready to go, and we'll just put the thing together and finalize it then. But basically, what the trick is to turn this down to where you're at a younger level. Let's just delete them right here. We add another editable poly. And this is where it comes very, very simple. You use insert, or you can use bevel, one of the two. I'll try bevel because it's a newer one. You push the settings so that you have this option, and then you drag the bottom one down so that it is in the general shape, but unfortunately this is not going to quite work because it's not quite a circle. If it was, you would be able to do that and then hit the plus button, cancel that out, extrude it down, and you'd be done. And you'd have the male end. However, what I'm going to do is delete this. I'm going to go ahead and delete this piece here later. And that way I will have fewer faces to bridge when I make that little ring, that little cylinder piece that juts down below it. It will just need to fit these few polys that are around here, which not that many. Let's see how many there are. Well, I gotta delete the base part real quick. But if I selected, let's do the loop. Oh, it doesn't want to do that. Yeah, it's too complicated to be able to use that. But anyway, you get the idea. It basically just goes in there and you just make a cylinder the same number of polygons that are around this perimeter, this circumference, and then just hit bridge, and the two of them will bridge the edges or the border together. And then you got a nice even mesh with the base piece out. So I will have this all done by the time we get back. I will be not broadcasting next week at all. Monday and Wednesday I will be out of town on business for training for my work. So I will reconvene not April 2nd either, because it's a loved one's birthday that I will be visiting. So Wednesday, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, let's see, 4th, April 4th will be when I'm return. We'll have a little bit of a hiatus for about a week and a half, 2 weeks actually. And then we'll reconvene on the 4th, and we will finish this thing up and move on to the fairy ring, the mushroom ring. And we'll do that then. All right. I'm going to save this as a separate file because we've already have it saved earlier with all of our pieces on there. Let me make sure, actually. Let me back up just to make sure. Do I still have my undos? Yes. Delete, delete, delete. Keep backing up. Delete, delete. There we go. All right, that's where we want. I can clean up the rest later. We will save it there. as a new file, and it will be safe. And I assure you that we'll have some trees done the next time we come back here. All right. I want to thank you all, everybody who showed up. That's really fantastic. We're slowly building up on the views, and I think once we keep going like this, maybe we'll get some more. Planning on doing more giveaways once we start doing the printing. We'll be giving those prints actually away after they're painted to those who visit on the Twitch channel. There won't be any real entry fee, no money involved or anything like that. It'll just be free giveaways that we just do because, quite frankly, I don't need the pieces anymore once I make the models and the molds and things like that. So stay tuned for that. Keep updated on Facebook and Twitter, as well as Instagram. Any of those work. I'll try to post on all of them. And until April 4th, you guys be good. Have a good holiday coming up. And we'll see you on the flip side. Y'all be good. Peace out.